OMAKASE, the life and words of author M. Karen. If this is our first time meeting each other, let me give you a brief introduction. My name is Max. I write books for a living. My pronouns are they, them, and welcome to my writing advice and inspiration podcast, OMAKASE. I hope that you are having a lovely day wherever you are. Over here in my little corner of the world, the weather is nice. I have had a wonderful week, and I can't wait to talk with you about it. If you are unfamiliar with the show, here's how the format goes. First, I tell you about my week, my creative process, what I've been doing, what I've been reading, and so on. In the second segment, I answer 2 viewer questions. And in the last segment, I propose to you a writing prompt, or a character question, something to get you thinking about writing. Before I start the show in proper, I want to let you know, as always, that in the description of this podcast and video are a bunch of handy links, such as the song that you hear at the beginning, how you can support me, treat me to a cup of coffee, the email you can send questions to, and more. Let us begin with my week. Things have been pretty good over here. Over at M. Karen Manor. I actually don't live in a manor, but maybe someday I will. You gotta have goals, and you also gotta give yourself deadlines. So let's catch up. It's been 2 weeks since that podcast where I talked about the deadline that I had given myself to finish the revision of this novel, which I think I'm still calling C79. The title's gonna change. I don't know what I'm gonna call this story. The original title literally no longer makes any sense. That's what the revision process does to stories. So I'm going to figure out a new title. But for now, let's keep calling it C79. Why not C79? Listen, there's many story reasons, most of which no longer apply, but that's the title. I gave myself 2-week deadline to finish the rewriting process. And let's report back. How did that go? Well, I did not finish it, but I am right at the end. Reviewing my process, I looked over my sheets, I keep track of everything, you guys know me. I missed one day because I got really tired/sick. I thought I was coming down with something, but it might have just been the heat. Things have cooled down again, the weather's wonderful again, so I'm happy. And additional to that, I had 2 writing days that were particularly slow, thanks to that chapter I talked about last time. That chapter was like pulling teeth. And then putting the teeth back together into your mouth. I think the description fits it very adequately. Ultimately, it was a fantastic chapter, and I did some of my best writing, but man, it took a long while. I feel like if I must use the descriptor vampire, I think that chapter was a time vampire for my deadline. But now, I am without question certain that this week I will finish the novel. I am right at the end. All I have left, and I spent all day yesterday writing a really powerful scene that it was engrossing. It was very intricate, and I tweeted about it. I sat down to write, and I didn't get up for 3 hours. And you know me, I'm all about, hey kids, take breaks. Hey kids, make sure to hydrate and to do all those things. I was hydrating, but I was writing, and my first timer went off, and I used Pomodoros, or I just give myself 25-minute timers. I always go past them because I stay in the zone, but I blew past the first timer as I was typing, and I'm like, what, it's been 5 minutes. I look at the clock, it's been 25 minutes. So you can imagine my surprise 3 hours later when I'm sitting in the chair, and I'm like, why does my butt hurt? What's up with that? And then I look at the clock, and I'm like, it's been 3 hours. I've been writing this scene for 3 hours nonstop. So, I got up and I had lunch. Then I sat back down and I didn't get up for 2 hours because that's what that chapter did to me. It was fun. It was really fun. The chapter's not over yet. There's a little bit left. But all that's left of the novel is a conversation, a bunch of action, a little bit of an intermission because you know that I love giving a little intermission just to catch up with other characters. The epilogue, and that's it. Does that sound like a lot? It isn't. It really isn't. So I find myself once again in this dreamlike state where I woke up this morning, and Tuesdays are the days that I record nowadays. And I woke up this morning and I'm like, yeah, I can't wait to write. And then I realized I'm not writing today. I'm recording a podcast today, which is still nonetheless very fun. So I'm once again in that little state. Thankfully, I get to write tomorrow and the day after that. So without question, by the time we meet again, I will most likely have finished the rewriting process of this novel. It has been a blast. A blast that hurts at times because Max from the past made some really, really unfortunate mistakes. But that's life, isn't it? That's life. Right now, I find plenty of solace in knowing that I am making a really, really good story now. And that's good. Did I meet my deadline? Nope. But that's life. Thankfully, my boss will understand. My boss is me. Sometimes my wife. But most of the time it's me. What's my plan after that? Well, Max said, looking over at their notes, I don't know. I wanted to go back to the book I finished writing recently. But I really feel like I just need like a mental reset because I went from... Have I even named the previous novel? I went from the novel I was writing to this novel right away. I didn't stop. I didn't give myself like a day to just reset. I think I should just give myself a day to reset. Not just a day off. I mean, I take days off. Listen, my wife won't let me not take a day off. So I may just need a day to just, I don't know, sit on the couch watching videos, just get my head out of all of these two stories so I can look at them with fresh eyes. I don't know. We'll see. By the time we meet again, I will either have started the next project, which seems unlikely, or B, I would have already... Or I would be coming out of a one-day break, like a complete just lay in the couch, doing something that's not thinking about stories. Watch YouTube videos? I don't know. Kill a whole day. Just, that's a visceral description. Just kill a whole day. Just to get my mind, just to get out of that story. A part of me wants to just immediately go back and keep rewriting the current story that I'm on, but that is a bad idea. I need distance. Who knows? I may have to just talk with my wife and see what she thinks might be the best course of action. She's really been looking forward to reading this story, so maybe I will focus on rewriting it. I don't know. Max from next week will tell you how that turned out. As for anything else regarding my week, I've been finishing audiobooks, reading books, playing games with my wife, but you know what? I'm out of time for today. Let's move over to the next segment of the show. This podcast is brought to you thanks to you, the wonderful people who support me through one-time donations on coffee.com/mkaren and through patreon.com/mkaren. Links to both of these in the description. Coffee is pretty much the best place to support me, though if you want to get these episodes early, Patreon is the place to go. I would like to give a shout out to one of my most generous patrons, Rival Moonlight. Rival Moonlight has a DeviantArt page. You can find out more about his writing and his work over at deviantart.com/Rival Moonlight. Thank you so much for your support. Before we get started with the questions of the day, I want to remind you that I take questions from pretty much everywhere where I put up content. Tumblr, Twitter, YouTube. There's also an email in the description of this podcast. Send me a question and I will most likely answer it on the show. I'm actually running out of questions because I answered 20 of them last week. So if you have a question, send it my way. Today, we're going to be talking about the topic of bad ideas or unfortunate world building, as well as names. But before we get started, I need to remind you as always that the following is just my advice, my opinion, and what works for me. Don't take it as gospel, instead take it as ramblings of a person who looks a little bit like me, or who sounds like this. Anyhow, there you go. Gotta get the disclaimer out of the way, because on the weeks that I don't do it, you bet your butt that there is a bunch of people sending me very rude emails. Anyhow, that's the thing about making content on the internet. No one's ever asked me about this because I assume that we all understand that if you put stuff on the internet, you're gonna have people sending you messages, sending you comments, being very rude. I got a really rude one this morning, but it was rude in a way where I'm like, oh, this person is just silly. Like, someone clicked on my guide to how to plan a novel, which is a video to help writers figure out how to outline a novel. And the person was like, this is a video for writers? And then left a bunch of homophobic comments following that. And I'm like, buddy, the writing's on the wall, buddy. You came into the wrong store. This is clearly a video for writers. Anyhow, the internet is a hilarious place. Make the most of it. Let us begin. You want to hear of a bad idea? The internet was a bad idea. Alright, so let's go over the first question of the day. A couple of weeks back, I talked about that chapter, or was it last week? I think it was last week. I also tweeted about it. This chapter that I wrote in the original version of this novel that I'm rewriting. And I mentioned that Max from the past, made some unfortunate world-building choices. And a dear viewer sent me a question wondering exactly what I meant. Was it bad writing? Was it bad characters? Was it tropes that I had put in the story without realizing it? What was my bad world-building choices? And this one here is hard to explain without just telling you what it was, and I would rather never have to talk about that world-building thing ever again, but I can talk around it. And this here is in case anybody's wondering, Max, how could this possibly apply to my writing? I think that in order to revise a novel, you really, really, really need that distance. The more time that passes, the more time I realize that there have been things in my novels that I'm not exactly 100% happy with. There is one thing in Justine's Blood that I am not happy with, and there is one thing in Raven's Gym that I am not happy with. A Secret Named Sophie has pretty much gone unscathed throughout all these years, and if I had to explain one, in Raven's Gym, people possess rings which give them abilities. Let's just boil it down to that. And at the end of that novel, there is a fight between two characters, and I don't know if I didn't make it clear, or I don't know if I just completely slipped, or I mean, I guess I made a mistake, because I certainly did, but I think I either didn't describe that people weren't punching each other, or I mistakenly described people punching each other, and physical combat, such as punching while wearing rings that have gems on them, is a little silly. That's the one thing where I'm like, I always imagine the combat to be as people like swiping each other, with their like nails, almost like claws, because of the way that the rings work. But I do realize, in retrospect, after all this time has passed, that I'm like, that is unfortunate. And when the time comes that I pick that novel up and I do something with it, I will most likely revise that piece of world building. For the novel that I'm currently rewriting, the unfortunate piece of world building came in the form of one character. This character, who is pivotal to the story, behaves in a way that I guess one could imagine as stereotypical. And at the time, I knew that character was going to require work, but I didn't realize just how much work they were going to require. This character, I have rewritten basically everything regarding this character. They are basically now the main character, because I honestly believe that they deserve to be in the spotlight from the beginning, and the story has improved from it. But what about bad world building? What about bad choices in world building? I feel like this is not something you can realize right in the moment, and that's why distance is just so important. I didn't have to wait 5 years to revise this novel. I think that, months apart would have given me enough to realize just how bad it got. But distance helps. And even now, I am battling that sensation where I want to go back right away and revise this novel, finally. I have like 3 pages of notes of things that need to get fixed. because I basically rewrote this whole novel from scratch. But at the same time, I feel like I need that distance. I feel like I need to get away from it for a little bit. Need to get away from it for a little bit before I can look at it again objectively. Before I can parse through the details and make the big choices. Choices like, should I rewrite everything this character said? Because as I've mentioned, when you have finished writing a novel, there is a lot of attachment to the effort and the time we put into those words. That's why I don't recommend revising right away after finishing the first draft. You're going to find yourself at moments where the right choice is to cut something or change something, and you will hesitate because you will look at it and go, but man, I spent the whole day writing this chapter. I can't just cut it now. I can't, change it in a dramatical way where I would have to rewrite it. It was so much work. And that emotion, that thought is poison. You must uproot it from your mind. Or, rather, give the story enough time so that attachment to the time you spent writing, the time you spent working, and the effort you put into writing it diminishes. And you can look at the story and remind yourself what the ultimate goal is. What are we doing here? We're trying to tell good stories. That's what we're trying to do. And that's why distance helps. Getting away from the story helps. In the question that I received, someone asked me, how could you possibly find the bad world building while you're writing the novel? And the answer to that is that more often than not, you can't. You can't know. One, because you haven't finished writing the novel. You need to know how far the novel ultimately goes to be able to... The word that comes to mind is measuring. But before you're able to tell, okay, this here is what happens, this here's what needs to change, this here, considering how the story ends, this thing from the beginning no longer makes sense, or this thing here needs to get changed or fixed or adapted. But you can't get there without first finishing the novel, and you definitely shouldn't revise your novel without giving it a little bit of time. That's it. That's it. I understand how if you're writing a story right now, you may be worried. Worried that you are building a story upon a faulty foundation. Maybe that you've made an unfortunate world-building choice really early in the story, and you're going to have to put a lot of work into it to fix it. I recommend not to worry about this now, because you don't know if that world building is unfortunate or not. You don't know if you made a mistake or not. You don't know yet. Maybe you did. Maybe you didn't. The only way to find out is to keep writing and to finish that novel. That's it. That's it. And someone out there may be wondering about something. And I can feel it. I can feel it across time and space. Someone is saying, Max, but wouldn't it have been easier for you to, instead of rewriting the novel, to just having written it the right way from the beginning? And to this I reply, it would be nice if we had the luxury to be able to know what's good and what isn't before we write it. But more importantly, this rewriting process is easy because I know what is going to happen in the story. And I know where each story beat needs to go. Some scenes have altered the course of the story, but in subtle ways. I know where the story needs to go. I know what needs to happen. And I write every scene faster than I do normally, because I know what the characters should be saying. This rewriting process is not as long, not by any means as long, as the process of writing a novel from scratch. And I am aided thanks to the time I spent 5 years ago. And I would also recommend not to worry too much about how long it takes for you to get that novel out. Novels take a long time. And at the end of the day, what are we here for? To tell good stories. The story I'm working on right now is so much better than its original version. And when the time comes that you can hold it in your hands, I promise you it is going to be amazing. And now, for the second question of the day, a dear listener reached out to me asking for advice when it comes to naming characters. They explained a familiar scenario, one that I am certain all of you are used to, in a scenario where naming characters might as well be the hardest thing of the process. Forget just getting a last name, a first name itself is like pulling teeth. Do I have any advice for that? My longtime listeners know that I do, but still tag along because I have something else I want to say. I was thinking about this recently. I was going to make a tweet, but here we are, in the podcast, so I think I'm just going to tell you about it. Long format. More than 280 characters at a time. What do I think about names? What advice can I offer to someone who is writing right now and has one of those characters who's just called Old Dude, Barista, or The Other Dave? Let us begin first with the new stuff. The stuff that I haven't talked about in a bit, and the stuff that I came to a realization recently. Names are weird. Names are so weird. And when it comes to naming characters, there is kind of this unspoken law that characters in fiction must have believable names, or names that would make sense for a person. And the thing that gets me, and I've been thinking about this a lot because my wife and I have been just watching a lot of true crime shows. And while watching a lot of true crime shows, you see interviews with, victims and prosecutors and detectives. And throughout watching, 80 plus episodes of Forensic Files on Netflix, we have found people, real people, with names that are absolutely unbelievable and silly. And every time we stumble upon one, I look at it, and I look at my wife and I tell her, I could never name a character this, because people would think that it is dumb, that it is silly. Max, how dare you name a character Mr. Sweat? No one in the world is named Mr. Sweat. And there I was, staring at the TV, listening to a prosecutor whose real name was Mr. Sweat. What do you do? What do you do? Another really good name, by the way, and I've been saving this one forever. There was an older lady whose name was, and I kid you not, her name was Lil, L-I-L, Lil Johnson. Her name was Lil Johnson. Her name was Lil Johnson. And I remember doubling over, just holding my face with both of my hands, and I'm like, I could never name a character Lil Johnson. I could never do that. I am as truth is stranger than fiction, isn't it? But let's go back to names. What does this mean for us being writers and trying to figure out names for characters? I honestly think that I'm coming around, and I think everything's up for grabs. I think I'm getting to the point now where I'm loosening up a lot, and I'm like, maybe I should name a character Lil Johnson. Maybe I should name a character Mr. Sweat. Maybe I should name a character a name that maybe it's a little silly and a little bit unrealistic, but it happens sometimes. And there's been experiences in my own life where when I have met people with silly, unbelievable names. My old dentist was, his name was Dr. Slaughter. His last name was Slaughter. I kept his business card just to make that joke to people all the time. Be like, hey, here's my dentist, Dr. Slaughter. And it's hilarious. And that was his real name. That was the story. That's just his family name. I think at one point they probably had a slaughterhouse or something. Just like people have the name Butcher. It's silly. But it's real, isn't it? Sometimes it just happens. We don't have control over our names. Sometimes you get a good one. Sometimes you don't. If I had to offer some new advice for looking up character names, I recommend going onto the internet, not just going to a baby site, or baby name site, excuse me, not just a website with babies in it. You want a website with names for babies. Um, Not only just that, but there's also websites where you can find the most common surnames per country and per race. So it can be very helpful if you're not familiar with a particular demographic. You can, find the last name that better suits them. That's one thing. Well, that's one thing that I've been doing. Other than that, another thing that helps is to lean back a little bit, consider the character who needs a name, and ask what their parents would have named them. One thing that helps is to go to baby name sites and look up the most popular names for that particular year. Like, what decade you're from if, the most popular, boy and girl name are so-and-so. That helps. And there are times when a character names themselves, or a character no longer carries the name that they were born with, and in that case, it helps to, consider the character, consider their point of view, and ask, what would this character name themselves? What would be the nickname they would give themselves? What nickname would their friends give them? I find that helps. Especially the advice about thinking about what the parents would name them, because then you actually, in most stories, that's not true, but in a lot of stories, characters can exist in their own little vacuum, and they don't have parents, and, they don't have extended family, and I'm guilty of that too all the time, but thinking about these things immediately gives you, or rather, it takes this enormous cloth of names, just an enormous list of names, and it narrows it down. There is one more thing, and here we go, it's time for that old piece of advice. There is one particular type of character name that I have never been too fond of, and that is character names that may serve to undermine a character's arc. I would like to inspire you to not name characters based on what happens to them in the story, because, if a person knows about names, then their entire arc and what happens to them in the story is kind of spoiled right away. The best example that I know is having a character in your story who betrays the main character and naming them Cain. That's I don't want to say the oldest trick in the book, but it's the cheapest trick in the book. It's oh, I have just met a new character, and their name is Cain, and they're being friendly towards the main character right now. I wonder if they're gonna betray us at the end. Spoiler, they always betray you at the end. And that's almost walking the line of being a trope. I would rather you think back and imagine, your character's parents, and consider the name that they would have given them, as opposed to giving them a name that matches exactly what happens to them in the story. Now, I can feel across time and space. I'm gonna say 2, 3, 4 weeks from now, my good friend Charles is listening to this episode, and they are chuckling to themselves because they read a manuscript of mine in which a character had a funny name. In this story, this character had green hair, and her name was Midori. Midori is Japanese for green. My friend Charles told me, "Isn't it funny that you give name advice? And here we have a character whose hair is green, and their name is green." To which I replied, "My dear friend Charles, I did not name that character. Her mother named her Midori because her mother was crazy about the color green." But what can you do? It's one of those moments where her name was Midori right off the start. As soon as she walked through it, and I'm like, oh my god, you have green hair because your mom had green hair, because of the genetic enhancements, because she loved the color green, and of course she named her daughter Green. What am I supposed to do? I just shrugged, and I'm like, Charles, listen, that one's off my hands. So, what I want you to take from this is that sometimes characters name themselves. I'm not saying it's gonna happen right now, but someday soon, you're gonna write a character, and they're gonna pop into your mind, and you're gonna know your name is Lil Johnson, and there's gonna be nothing you can do. Just like when sometimes we get characters whose name just like slips off of them, like they have like they're just covered in Teflon, like, is your name Matthew? Nope. Is your name Paul? Nope. Is your name Lenny? Nope. Names just slip off some characters. Other characters, though, take those names and claim them. Someday you'll find the character. Maybe a background character, maybe your main character. And their name will be Lil Johnson. And there will be nothing, absolutely nothing, you will be able to do about it. Nothing like a cup of coffee in the middle of the day. How are we all doing, guys? Enjoying the show? Having a good time? I hope that I'm being good company, and I hope that you're having a good day. And again, if you're not, then I hope that I can help brighten it up a little bit. And I hope that things get better. Okay? The show's not over yet. It really isn't. But I just want to slip that in there. I'm being reflective. I'm being reflective. Yes, at this point, I'm actually reflecting light all throughout the room. I'm sparkling. I'm dazzling. I am reflecting light in all directions. Anyhow, that's a good line. That line's gonna show up in one of my books. That's a line that could show up in Ho-Ho and the Fabulous Gays. But anyhow, hi there. Welcome to the final segment of the show, the prompt, or in this case, the character question. Your task is to think about stories, to think about your characters, and to help yourself, inspire yourself, to sit down and write. Life is the one thing we have no control over, and if life's treated you like it's treated me, it gets in the way all the time. And it gets in the way of writing. But thinking about our characters, reflecting on them, helps. Because when we think about them, they become more real. They become a part of our conscious. A thing that we can call upon whenever we need to. So today, let's think about our characters. I am going to give you a new prompt, and then I'm going to go over last week's prompt with my characters. Are you ready? Let's go. Today, we have a very fun character question. It's one that I know that I've made a slide of this back in the old Tumblr days when I would make little slides with prompts on them. And I remember I made this one, and it's a really good one. It's almost a mechanical prompt. It's something that you're going to have to grab like pen and paper to figure out. But it's fun because it helps us figure out parts of our character's personality when contrasted against the time of day. I want you to go character by character in your story and answer the following question. What is this character's daily routine? How do they go about a normal day? Imagine them. At what time do they get up? What's the first thing they do? Where do they go? How do they prepare themselves for the day? Think about the way in which they mechanically move from stage to stage of their morning, afternoon, or depending on your character's sleeping schedule, nightly routine. Okay? That right there is your task. Think about it. Slip it into the back of your mind as you're walking home, washing the dishes, playing with your dog, having dinner. Think about it. Think about it. And now, let us review last week's prompt. Last week's prompt, as part of the 1-year anniversary of the show, was all about 1 year later. I'm going to go through the two main characters of the current story that I'm working on, which you know as A and N. And I am going to tell you, we're going to catch up with them a year after the conclusion of the story. I feel a little uneasy talking about this, mostly because I'm writing the conclusion of the story. So let's consider this my guessing of what would happen the year after the conclusion of the novel. Now, this answer is going to be, right away, it's going to be different because A and N are two parts of the same unit, basically. They hang out together, at least they hang out together at the end of the novel. And I imagine that a year later, both of them would have arrived at N's destination. I don't think it would take more than a few months for, their ship to arrive to where the ship is ultimately going to. I don't know if N is going to find the answer that they want. A part of me is unsure if N's quest to find the truth is folly. But that's part of the ending of the novel. You're supposed to wonder, what if they find it? What if they don't find it? What if N travels halfway across the universe and finds out that there is nothing left? Nothing left to mourn. Nothing left to even hold in your hands. But that's the quest, isn't it? Let's consider the worst case scenario, that they end up traveling across, halfway across the universe, and that there's nothing left. I think that this would be N's the worst thing in their life, and although they are quick to bounce from things, I imagine that N would most likely break down, be inconsolable for a long while, because, gee, that's rough. It's very rough. Weeks, maybe? Months? I imagine that their ship would probably meander from system to system, just finding ways to get by. A would probably take a leadership position, I think, while N comes out of mourning. N is really more of the leader. A is most definitely a follower. And I imagine them that in the months that follow, they would find a rhythm in their lives. I don't know if they would settle down in any particular planet. I don't think so. I don't know. If anything, I think that A would like to go back to their home. If anything, just to visit and say hi. But I don't know. Would they do that within a year? I don't think so. I almost feel like A is kind of postponing going back home. It's kind of hard to, everybody thinks you're dead and then you just show up a year later. It seems a little bad, My first mental thought is, oh man, wouldn't that be the most embarrassing thing in the whole world? So I know you all thought I died, but I'm here. It's rough. Let's say, for instance, the other scenario. Let's say that N finds the answer that they want, and that there's plenty left to hold and plenty left to cherish. I think that if that were the case, they would definitely dock and probably spend several years there in that planet. I imagine that N would pick up the pieces of what was left of their life, if there were any. It's been a long time. I can see that split, that fork in the road, where if there's nothing left for N, they'll wander through space together. But if there is a planet still there, N and A would definitely settle down there. I think so. There, near the fields of silver grass, near that quiet little creek where N grew up. Maybe in the house they grew up, if it's still standing. Either way, I do think that eventually they would most likely return to space. And that A would eventually, maybe years later, would want to go back home, if just to say hi. Beyond that, I don't know. N was never one to settle down anywhere. Their whole life is about traveling, about seeing things, meeting people, talking to people. Their craft is one similar to storytelling, but a much more personal one. Creating tales and stories for a single person, instead of, thousands of people. So I think that ultimately the two of them would travel. No matter what happened, If it was good or if it was bad, both of their hearts belong out in the blackness of space. What about your characters, though? What if the prompt had been 10 years from now? 20 years from now? What if the prompt had been imagining the setting of your story 100 years after? How different would it be? What things would have changed? What parts of history would have repeated? This prompt right here, there's a lot to it. And I can imagine myself going through every one of my stories and adding something else, something extra to answer that question. So why not phrase it now for you? A little extra something for you to carry home. What would the world of your story look like? 100, 1,000, 2,000 years from the point where it ends. What would be happening? Who would be the main players? What would be the parts of history that repeat, and the new players in history never seen before in this world? Things change, but they also don't change. Imagine this world. What's that? Could it be? Is that a little plot bunny staring inside of you? A little idea you just found, you stumbled upon. There's this embodied voice in your speakers, in your headphones, telling you, hey, what about 2,000 years from now? That's an interesting story idea, isn't it? It might just be good enough to write. And so, welcome to episode 43 of my writing advice and inspiration podcast, OMAKASE. I hope they had a lovely time. I hope that I was good comfort during your drive home, during your break at work, during that little time that you give yourself to hype up before writing. Writing is hard. And writing a novel takes a long time, but I hope that between now and the next time we meet, that you sit down to write. And you know what? If you do so, tell me. Add me on Twitter, even if it's just a little bit, and even if you only write once. Tell me. And you know, I will be there, and I will reply to you, and I will keep inspiring you to keep going. Keep writing. The world needs your stories. Okay? Okay. And now, as part of the ending of the episode, I want to let you know that if you really enjoy this show, please consider leaving a 5-star rating and a review over on iTunes. Reviews are the way in which a small show like this can continue to grow, and I would really appreciate your support. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you next week. All right. Are they all gone? Is there no one left listening? Wait, hold on. I see you in the background. Hey, you're still there in the seats. Hey. In the back row, move a little closer. Hey, welcome back to the End of the Video Club. I'm your host, Karen. Hi. Welcome to a segment where I give shoutouts to every single person supporting me through Ko-fi and Patreon. And I also, say dumb things. I try to amuse you and make you laugh through the intricate act of making a fool of myself. I am going to be giving shoutouts, and I'm also not allowed, as per cosmic law, to make any edits. So get ready for full-on silly. First, I want to give shout-outs to the people supporting me through Ko-fi. Also, in case you're wondering, and if this is your first time listening, tag along, there will be funny stories at the end. First off, I want to thank everyone supporting me through coffee.com/mkaren, the #1 place to support me. Treat me to a one-time donation. And I will read out whatever it is you write in your comment, such as one we got this week. I'll get through it in a second. First off, thank you to Lishadra, Angela, Kristen Lofton, Sylvia Leitilla, Polycraftual, and, literally a couple of days ago, Das Danya, with the message, thank you for saving one of my characters. So here are your well-deserved coffees. Enjoy, Max. And a thumbs up. Thank you so much. Yo, listen. I am so glad that I can help you not make the mistakes that I have made. So that's, if anything, that's literally the whole point of advice. Someone out there learns something and wants you to not have to learn that the hard way. That has been the whole point of this podcast and this whole channel. And, even back from when I was, going to creative writing courses, and I would see other writers make unfortunate choices, and I would internalize right at that moment, Max, never ever ever do that. No, don't do that. Only villains do that. But yeah, hey Das, thank you for your support. And now, let's slide over to Patreon. Hey, patreon.com/mkaren. You know how this goes. Let's give a shout out to Rival Moonlight, Soul Muse, Lacey, Irina Phoenix, A. Howard, Heather is Writing, Nicola, Brenda, Brenda. Do I always give Brenda the musical treatment? I think I do. Amelia, Pat Eitzen, Melanie Ashford, Shido Tsubasa, Caitlin, Blarg, Kamishore Rao Shaluri, Kathy Lindsay. Kathy, you've been a Patreon for 10,000 years. You've been a Patreon for 51 months! Oh, jeez! When will I get your name right? That's a long time. Hey, Kathy, thanks for supporting me. Gee, 51. How many babies is that? How many? This is how I measure time. I measure time in babies. How many babies? 51 divided by 12. That's over 4 years! Jesus! I'm sorry, Kathy. I'm sorry. Can't pronounce. Lindsay. Oh, God. Kathy, please. Don't leave. Kathy, I'll get your name right. I promise. I'll change. All right. Baby, come back. Kaylee, Mary Foster Smith, Juan Nunes, Raquel Fernandez, Janosch Hepotsky, Skydy White, Evie Ouroboros. Hold on, is it Evie? Okay, I'm saying it like the Pokemon, which is just shows how much of a nerd I am. Evie Ouroboros. Such a good name. Connor, Rhiannon August, Nicolay, Jaytana Kirkwood. Let me just turn away from the microphone. Aerosols! Noam Sahar, Noel Santomes, Kiel, Lear Killo, Clem Pastor, Nicole Grissom, Biting the Sun, Christiane, Amanda Stevens, Zero Woods, KM Anderson, and Alexo Hoshi. Thank you so much for your support, you guys. You guys are the best. And now here we are, at the end of the video club, at the end of a journey, at the end of another episode. Is there any knowledge, any experience that I would like to impart, that I would like to pass on to you guys? I don't know, this week's being weird. My wife and I, oh, here you go. Okay, time to alienate everybody who doesn't play video games. My wife and I, we have projects, we play games in our off time, we watch movies or shows in our off time, and we had this project where we were playing through the HD re-release of Final Fantasy VII. And one of the things that I recommend that everybody does is to go back to the things they enjoyed and experience them again with new eyes. in order to learn from them, especially as a writer. And I knew the writing in Final Fantasy VII, which from now on I will refer to as FF7. I knew the writing in that game wasn't good. I knew it wasn't. But replaying through the game, Jesus, it's so bad. For anyone who has played the game, the point in the story where the writing just dies is the Temple of the Ancients. I am going to say... No, I can't say that word, because this is a clean podcast. But let me just say that at the Temple of the Ancients is the point where the writing for that game just dies. Up until that point, it could be like, yeah, that's a bad piece of writing, but it's fine. This isn't effective, but this over here is good. This character here, their voice works. At the Temple of the Ancients is where the story just feels like, and I hate to say like a child wrote it, because children can be very smart and can be very effective at writing, but it just felt like a really rough, badly written first draft by someone with a very short attention span, because the story just jumps from thing to thing to thing to thing, and the world is ending, the characters are in a terrible moment of danger, but suddenly we have to have a conversation about matchmaking, and I'm like, what's tone? What's theme? I knew how that game ended, but my wife didn't, because it was her first time, and I knew she was gonna be mad, and she was so mad when the game just ends. With no closure. With no satisfaction to be gained from it. And then the epilogue, and I'm gonna say something very vulgar right now, okay? If you're listening with children in the room, cover their ears. The game, for all intents and purposes, has an epilogue that I can boil down to a middle finger right in front of the screen. Just the middle finger to the player. The kind of ending that makes you go, none of this mattered. Everyone you cared for is dead. And I'm like, wow, what a fantastic way to end this amazing, well-written story. So yeah, it's still so fresh in our minds. Like, it's been like several days, but like, while we're having dinner, like, at one point, one of us will pause the video we're watching while eating dinner, and will say something to the extent of like, oh my god, FF7 is so bad. FF7 is really badly written. Why is this game popular? And the answer to that is very simple. A bunch of people played it when they were very young. And when you're young, you don't realize how bad things are. Listen. I'm not judging. I played a lot of things, I read a lot of books, I watched a lot of shows that were really bad because I was young. And when you're young, you don't know. But that's exactly why it is important to go back to the things that we enjoyed and analyze them again. And to learn from those things. Because it's not just to go, oh yeah, the things I liked are bad. Because the things that you like shouldn't be the defining element of your identity. You're not a fan of anything. You're a person who happens to like those things. That's not your identity. Your identity is much more defined and important than just the things you find cool. Oh no, what's this? The crowd, they're pushing me towards a soapbox. Oh no, this is a very short soapbox. Or maybe I'm just a very short person. I would very much rather if people describe themselves with traits. What are you? Are you humble? Are you grateful for the people in your life? Do you consider yourself to be brave? Do you consider yourself to be kind? As opposed to things such as like, yeah, I'm a fan of sports. I'm a gamer. That's the one. Any person who says I'm a gamer, I'm like, no. But yeah, hey. Listen, okay, this is going long. It's fine. Nobody's listening. I remember my favorite films of all time. My favorite film of all time is Back to the Future. I really like that film, and I was terrified of going back to it with my wife because it was her first time seeing it. And I was terrified that it wouldn't hold up, and a lot of it doesn't hold up. But a lot of it still contains that wonder that inspired me to tell stories. That wonder of this mix between technology and reality and this fantasy and this idea, of what would it be like if this happened? The what if scenario, the what if question that when injected into a young person's mind just has their imagination grow. And a lot of that was still there. A lot of the writing doesn't hold up. A lot of the basic beats of the story don't hold up. A lot of it is really uncomfortable when you think about it. But when I came out of it, I didn't feel bad. I didn't feel like I was a lesser person. I came out of it with so many lessons. And I think that's important. Because at the end of the day, I don't care if Back to the Future is a good movie or not. All I care about is the art that I'm making and the person that I am. Listen. I'm getting off the soapbox. It's actually more like a DVD box. It's actually 2 Back to the Future DVDs stacked together, and I'm just like have my feet on them. That's exactly what my soapbox looks like. Hey guys, I hope that you are doing all right. Hey, life's hard, writing's hard, but we keep going, and I want you to keep going. Get a little bit of writing done, okay? But turn off the podcast, go get a little writing done, and if there's something in the way, take care of it. Send out that job application. Call your mom. Clean your room. Finally go out and get groceries. That's me and my wife. We need to go get groceries, but we've been putting it off. Take care of that thing you need to do, okay? You're a writer, yes, but you're also a human being first. Take care of yourself, and then get back into the writing, okay? And I want to leave you with the number one thing. The thing that I want you to hold inside of you. An anchor to remind you. A lighthouse to guide you in the darkness. Today, right now, today is a good day to write.